Guys, welcome back to Serial at Midnight. My name is Heath Holland. I'm joined by Anastasia Elfman for a conversation about two things. Anastasia, welcome back to Serial at Midnight.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you back because I know so first of all, you're a super huge Lon Chaney Sr. fan. You're a super huge Peter Lorre fan. You love classics. And when we talk about The Thing, I think a lot of us think of John Carpenter's The Thing, but that's based on an earlier movie, which was based on a short story. So there's a lot to kind of cover here and unpack here. Um, first of all, do you remember your first experience with John Carpenter's The Thing? I think I saw it on television first.
Yeah, I feel like it was like at home and maybe like a VHS copy or something like that. It's like we didn't have streaming options, growing
Yeah.
up. So yeah, I'm guessing that. I don't remember it seeing it in a theater, but ironically, like a little side story, a couple of years ago, I think it was like Fathom Events was screening Carpenter's The Thing in a bunch of theaters, and one of our friends, Mick Garris, who's like this wonderful horror icon, on his own right, he went to go see it, and it was in the wrong like aspect ratio or something. Like they were really messing up on the projection. And so he like tweeted about it, and I guess Alamo Drafthouse, the theaters, reach out to him and let him do like a run of the thing screenings where he got to like introduce the film, and like they projected it correctly on the right aspect ratios and all that stuff. And my daughter and I, Audrey, we had like a mommy and me date, and we kind of like dressed up and like little she dressed up in a little hazmat suit, and we watched it, and that was her first experience seeing it. She got to see it on the big screen, which was like amazing.
Okay, did it? So that's so many questions. I'm like, how are they
I'm
showing
so
the wrong
sorry
aspect?
so
No,
much.
it's great though. I'm like, okay, Mick Garris, wrong aspect ratio. What theater was it? But now I just want to ask, did it freak your daughter out? Because it's a freaky movie, or I think it's a freaky movie.
Oh, well, okay. So here's the thing. Like she's grown up with like Richard Elfman being her dad and then me being her mom. And so when she was very, very young, I did practical effects professionally. So she would come to the set, she would come to the shop and stuff. So she's been around all of this stuff. And plus she grew up on sets because, with like Rick and I, we do films. So she's like, this is kind of like old hat for her. And I've also been very open and like explaining like, hey, this is simulated, this is fake, artists create this, and it's an art form, and you can learn this and everything, and film and sound design and score always like enhance the experience of a visual practical effect. So she was
Mhm.
okay with it, and we also kind of watched a preview beforehand to make sure she was cool, because she's at an age, she might have been 14 or 15 when the screening happened, but she was at an age where she was asking to watch horror movies. And so I've been like showing her the classics, like the Universal monsters and things like that. So it's been a really wonderful experience for me, because that's one of my big things as a parent, is to like
Mhm.
shove a bunch of important classic cinema and eventually like important horrors.
That's a good point, and we should mention that too because I've done the same thing. We have to teach film appreciation. Like it doesn't just happen, and I think that we're seeing maybe some of the consequences of film appreciation not being taught. We're having people that don't want to go to the movies. They just want like, well, this would be better if it was a 10 episode streaming series. I'm like, no, no, no. You have to teach that. So I did the same thing. Interestingly enough, I showed my daughter The Thing, the Carpenter version, when she
Yeah.
was about 14 or 15. And she went into it saying, like, she's like, is this practical effects? And I was like, yes, and they're great. She was like, they're not going to be good because CGI is so much better. And I was like, really? And it's the generational thing, right? Because I think practical effects are way better than CGI. Uh,
Yeah.
and she came out like, especially the scene where there's the head like the tendrils and the head that comes. That got her. And so I was like, yes, all right, practical effects still have magic. I know that hurts you because you worked on
Oh,
effects.
totally. Well, okay, so I have to like do like a fun little warning thing, because we have a lot of friends who do like VFX and like the CGI stuff. So
Yeah.
I love them as well. I think that there's a marriage like what they do with example, like Walking Dead or Fear the Walking Dead, where they have practical like zombies, and then they they patch out like a green like a template so that they can enhance it, like there's like a jaw missing or something like that. So I
Hmm.
think right now in our technology, it's like way better than what they were dealing with like in the 1980s. But like I feel like right now there's been kind of like a marriage where they can work seamlessly together. But I always like am very pro practical effects, puppetry, animatronics, those kind of things. And I want to give those artists like jobs, like we
Hmm.
need to keep that going because they're artists, it's a craft that they learned.
Yeah. Well, and that's a very it's diplomatic, but it's also true. And I have people in my audience that are in visual effects as well, and they're gonna see this and be like, "Hey," but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't
So
know.
I'm not
It's also
like,
my age, right? Like I
yeah.
can't help it.
No, because I don't want to offend anybody because they're artists as well. And actually, ironically, our daughter Audrey is going to school to be an animator and probably work in effects and things like that and doing her own like gaming, creating games and things like that. So I've got to,
Yeah.
yes, be very diplomatic so I don't
It's
offend her one day.
it's a new world. It's and it's been a new world for a while. So I don't know. John Carpenter's The Thing is this. I think it's a masterpiece. I think that it's pretty much a perfect movie. I don't know if there is such a thing as a perfect movie, but it's pretty close to it because it really captures that feeling of tension and like what I love about it is you can't trust anybody. Your neighbor, your best friend could be the enemy. It could be this monster in disguise. And when we talk about the 1951 original, if people don't know, John Carpenter based his movie on a 1951 movie called The Thing from Another World. And even the title font, right? The Carpenter's the where it's like it burns out, it's like The Thing. That's in
Yeah.
the 1951 original, which is this amazing effect that looks great. I assume that's probably practical because in 51 they didn't have, I don't think it's animated. I think they really, I don't even know. I don't know how they did it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure about the original one, but yeah, you can definitely see an ode, which I love when they put like little odes or Easter eggs, when it's like based off of something else, like the thing from another world, and then the thing, Carpenter's version. But yeah, they both had that wonderful opening sequence with, I think they said you're probably familiar with this, but with Carpenter's version, they blocked it out on like a fish tank or something and filled it up, I think with smoke beforehand, or maybe it had it once it start caught fire, but they had like a trash bag or something that they lit on fire to like have it disappear, which is so crazy and
That's
unique. And
cool.
I love like the jerry rigging of,
Yeah.
like finding out how people do, create effects.
It's
That's
an
always,
innovation. Yeah,
yeah,
it's an innovation with something that you might have in your house already. It's finding creative ways to use what you have to make something. I think that's cool too. Um,
totally.
the reason I asked you if you remembered where your first viewing of the Carpenter version is because I actually think I saw the 1951 version first because our house was a very well, first of all, it was a very sheltered religious house. I've talked that's a whole other video. But we had like AMC before it was what AMC is now, when they used to show classic movies, and Turner Classic Movies, things like that. Those were always on. So I saw The Thing from Another World when I was little, and it was effective to me because it was this monster. Like if you're a kid, that's another reason I wanted to ask about what your daughter thought about Carpenter's version is like I feel like these stories really resonate when like the more innocent you are, the more belief you have when you're younger, they have a lot of power. And but it's interesting to me how much Carpenter keeps and how much he doesn't keep. And that's one of the things I want to talk about is that so it's the both of them are set in the Arctic, this ice land, this landscape of ice. Um, but there's a whole element to the Carpenter version that's like you can't trust your neighbor that I feel if so it's rooted in the source material from 19 the novella was written in 1938, which seems early to me considering how paranoid it is. It's a paranoid
Yeah.
it's very
Yeah,
paranoid.
it felt like it was more like in the 50s, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
you're correct. Yeah.
See, I think about it as like a metaphor for communism because all these 50s sci-fi movies are like, what happened to Bill? Bill's different now. Bill's a communist, like they don't say it, but that's what they're thinking. It's like a thin
But
metaphor
they
for
say
like, yeah, yeah.
it.
Um, but at like 38, that's before World War II, and it's before America's involvement in World War II. And that just seems like a more fun-loving, and now it is the Great Depression, so it's not super fun-loving, but like it's a more innocent time in terms of where America was. But the movie, so that's in the source material. That's in the 1930. This paranoia is in the 1938, and then the movie can't do that, or they don't do that because it's a cheap 50s sci-fi movie with like, you know, a very limited budget. I said they do a lot with the budget. I should say they
They
stretch it.
sure do.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt like when I was rewatching it, because I watched it maybe like 10, 15 years ago. Like it's not one of my favorite films, but I do, give it all of its praise for like what I've said is that it inspired a bunch of creators that inspire me. So it's always interesting to like kind of, research the history of something that I love, and I love the thing. But yeah, I mean, I was really impressed with like they must have chilled the set because there was some, like some heated air coming out of their
Do you know
mouth.
how they did that? They
How
filmed
did they
it
do
in
it?
an ice storage facility. That part, they filmed in an ice storage facility.
Yeah, because I was clocking it and I was like, it isn't all the time. It's like only
Yeah.
in this area. So like I wonder how. And then I was seeing like some of the outside shots seemed like they were all done on like a stage because I thought that I could see like a seam and I was like, is that my TV or the screen or whatever? I was like, okay, I think I see a little seam, which I think is fun to kind of spot those
Oh
kind of things
yeah.
out.
Like if you see an old episode of Star Trek and you can basically you see the brush strokes in the backgrounds or whatever. They shot part of it at a glacier national park, and then they shot part of it in this ice storage facility, and then obviously sets. Like they shot so much of it
Yeah.
on sets. It's an RKO film too. We should mention that it's an RKO film. But it's like you, I don't love it. We're talking about the 1951 original. I don't love it, but revisiting it for this conversation, I was like, it's slower than I remember it being. Like not a lot. There's a whole lot of talking and not a lot of
Yeah.
action.
Well, yeah, that I mean that's like also with the novella because I recently reread that and it's a lot of a slow build and a lot of like descriptions of like what's on the table or they're like it's just like a lot of stuff and I was hoping that it was going to get to the
Hmm.
interesting stuff a bit faster. So it was, for me like didn't love the novella but respect it. But it was a tough read for me to get through.
Yeah. Well, and I forgot it because we were talking about making this video, and I was like, "You've read the novella?" I had forgotten that it even was a novella. And then after we talked, and we were emailing, and after we talked, I was like, "Wait a minute, this sounds really familiar." And I went to my bookshelf, and I have this book called Real Future, and I bought this. I mean, this was in the 90s. I bought this 25 years ago, probably. No, probably longer than that. And it's the short stories that inspired a bunch of movies. So 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Fly, Total Recall, and the story that inspired The Thing from Another World is in here. It's Who Goes There by John W. Campbell Jr. And it's I did not reread it. Hold that up. Talk so the camera switches to you.
Hello, hello. Look at that little puppy. What's he doing?
Oh man. That's got to be from the 50s or the 60s, right? That's got to be like OG.
Yeah,
That looks
I
super
think
retro.
so. Yeah, well, yeah, it's holding up okay. It's got a little sign of aging, so I was really careful with like peeling it open and I didn't want to crack the spine.
Oh yeah.
I want to keep it together. I
Are you
love
gonna put it in a glass case when we get done?
Oh yeah, like a little bell jar or something. Yes.
Suck the air out of it, like ka.
Yeah, nobody even look at it.
Yeah, cover it in a black canvas.
Yeah, a little curtain that opens and closes like at Disneyland. The evil queen.
That's great. Yeah, but anyway, it's kind of a slow story, and there's a lot like in the movie. There's a reporter, like our entry to the story is a reporter who's like, I'm looking for a story, and they're like, well, there's something going on in the Arctic, and he's like, let me go up there, and like the Air Force is involved. It's a very different thing, and it doesn't have, and there's only one. I guess I'm spoiling the 1951 version, but it's okay, right? You
Oh
guys know.
yeah, can we do like a spoiling like flash?
Yeah, for sure. I won't say how it ends. How about that? We won't talk about how either movie ends in case somebody,
Well,
uh,
I feel like at this point they
right?
probably should have watched either one.
If you're gonna watch a video about two things on YouTube, hopefully you've seen at least one of them.
Exactly,
What is
exactly.
this thing that they refer to? No, I hope nobody says that. The book, well, the movie, the 51 version, it's kind of gruesome too because this creature lives on blood, right? And in the Carpenter version, it's a little bit enhanced. It's a little bit darker and a little bit more like it's taking over these organic forms. But in the movie, I keep saying the movie. In the 51 version, it's almost like a vampire, like it's living on blood. And then they like it loses an arm, and there are these little pods in it that sprout life, like plant life.
I
It's
know.
really
I was like, okay, don't remember that, but let's go with it. Like we're gardening now, and it kind of like goes, it's a plot point that goes almost nowhere. And I'm like, like, why did we even set this up, you know?
I think that it's supposed to be a metaphor. I read it as a metaphor for like man's hubris with science. Like man played God. Man, like because they're talking about what they can do with this, like the practical application of this blood, of this life form. And that's like all the 30s, 40s, 50s, it's all about, man can't play God. That's
Guess
even
what?
Frankenstein.
We
That's
are.
right.
No, and I was gonna say that I saw just in the performance of the actor who plays the thing in the 1950s version, it was total Frankenstein moves with the backhanding of things and the slow movement. Even the character design, it's so different from the novel. I think in the novel they were saying like three or so like red eyes and like kind of blue worms or something for hair, and it was like 4 feet tall, and I'm like,
Yeah.
who the hell is this tall babe breaking through the door? Like that's not the same.
Could you imagine if they had tried to do that though in 1951 with the effects the budget that they had? It would have been like wire and paper mache or something.
Oh yeah, no, that I mean they probably would have gotten like a kid or something to like run around chasing, and we're probably working long hours as much as the adult actors, I imagine.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I don't even want to think about what they were using for the snow. Like
Yeah.
I hope nobody got any like health problems later,
Oh, for real. Yeah. Because
right?
that
Like
documentary just came out about
something.
the John Wayne movie and how everybody got cancer from that John Wayne movie. Um,
God.
yeah. Okay. So you're talking about James Arness as the thing, the creature, and it's interesting because he was so embarrassed by this role, he didn't
Oh,
even go to the premiere. He just
oh
stayed
no.
home because he felt like, like I'm an actor. This is what this is where I'm at. But like 4 years later, 4 years after this, he would become the lead. He would become, of course, Marshall Dillon on Gunsmoke and become one of the biggest stars in the world. I mean, that show went for 20 years and then they brought it back for TV movies. They couldn't let it go. So it's just interesting, these stepping stones in people's careers. There's also a controversy about who actually directed the 1951 version because like now, so was it the director was Christian, this credited as Christian Nyby. I think I'm pronouncing that right. But the rumor is that Howard Hawks stepped in and directed it. And you know what it reminds me of, the Poltergeist thing with Toby Hooper and Steven Spielberg. Like, who directed this movie? And
Yeah.
what do you think?
Well, I mean, it feels like it was probably Hawks, but it's hard to say.
Yeah.
I wasn't there. But it also reminds me, if I can like bring a story back to Lon Chaney Sr., it reminds me of his uncredited directorial scenes for like a 1925's Phantom of the Opera, where he directed, because there was such angst between cast and director that he ended up directing his own scenes, which I think is amazing. And he should probably ended up, just knowing him as a creator, he was very hands on and he probably did a lot of his own directing when you think about it.
You're talking about Lon
But
Chaney
anyway,
Sr.?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna tell people that you and I ran into each other at the at Exoticon in Los Angeles, and you were
Yeah.
wearing a Lon Chaney Sr. shirt. Like you
Yeah.
represent this man everywhere you
You
go.
got to support the team, right? Like
That's right.
always supporting. And if they ask me who it is, I'm like, ooh, I get to bring up Lon Chaney Sr. in a conversation that has zero to do.
You're just like, well, and
It's like,
yeah.
how can I bring him up naturally? Oh, I can't. Oh well. It's like the what the like degrees of Kevin Bacon. I'm like degrees of Lon Chaney Sr. How do we do it?
Maybe we need a Lon Chaney Sr. documentary. I'm just saying.
Hey,
If
I'm
you know any filmmaking people, wink, wink.
I might know too. No, I'm
Yeah.
joking.
If you could find a director and if you could find somebody to score the thing, but where do you find like a
Oh
composer in this
man,
day
I
and
wish
age?
my family did more in film.
I know. Um, but anyway, so just to go back to the directing controversy, I just think it's interesting because like I know like that's the Toby Hooper Spielberg thing, but this was 30 years earlier than that. And one of the things that I kind of discover that is we both love classic cinema, right? When you look into it, when you start to investigate more movies and the stories behind the movies, you realize that nothing is new. We're just echoing things that have already happened before. And so that for there to be a director, like who directed this movie in 1951, and going even earlier than that, it's interesting to me, like the whole struggle for credit and like just there's nothing new. And that's one of the things I love about classics and digging into the classics is learning the patterns and how we just keep doing some of the same things over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. And well, rewatching the 50s The Thing, um it was interesting to me. I even though, like people will say it's like low budget and just like a silly like sci-fi romp or whatever. I thought that they did really great with filming it. It felt like a full project, and I enjoyed how they set up the shots, and it felt almost like watching a stage play, and the dialogue was really on top of each other, even though I thought that some moments, kind of like the love story was a tiny bit slow, but I did enjoy that. I wasn't, when I first watched it, I wasn't expecting that just because it's like, I'm used to Carpenters and there were like zero women.
Mhm.
So that was kind of interesting. With the women characters, it was nice to see that they showed them as doctors as well as being able to like be pretty and maybe a love interest. I mean, I don't love that they had to that one of them had to be a love interest, but I understand where they were going with it. But I like that they were like doctors and stuff there.
Well, and so it's interesting that you bring up women in the thing because there aren't any, as you said, in the Carpenter version. But then they made this movie again in 2011, and it's got Mary Elizabeth Winstead in it. So I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember a whole lot about that movie because I saw it and then I was like, because it's when I have the Carpenter version, I don't know why. I don't, and you can maybe speak to this, but when Hollywood keeps making so many of these remakes, they don't stick with me. I just don't think about them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always cautious about a remake because most of the time, I would say like 99% of the time, I cherish the original one. So I don't want anybody remaking it. Like I've heard that there's like a Death Becomes Her remake happening, and I'm like, please do not. What you were saying, that is to me a perfect film. You can start and stop it at any moment, and I will stop what I'm doing to sit down and watch it. Like it's a wonderful, perfect comedy from the set design, costume effects, all of that.
But maybe if you're 10 and you see the 2011 version of the thing, that's your thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess also technically that more recent one is more of a prequel that connects to Carpenter's, like it ends where Carpenter's starts off
Mm.
or something
Yeah.
like that. So technically it's not like a remake, but I totally understand where you're coming from with like it falls a little flat because also it's like we've had these films generally when they're doing a remake or a prequel or something like that. It's like we've had them for so long, they just become a part of us, and it's like I don't want anybody to mess it up you know
Do you have anything else you want to say about the 51 or the 82 version?
I like some of the lines where it was like, close the door, you know? Like I could see like watching this as a midnight film and then just everybody yelling, close the door. You know, when they're like coming into the officer's office and there's a gust of wind and snow
Yeah.
materials coming through, and so he like yells.
Yeah. This also has one of the most famous lines in any science fiction movie, which is keep watching the skies. That's where this movie comes from, or that's where that this movie is where that line comes from, and it is kind of the line most associated with 1950s science fiction. Keep watching the skies, fellas, that kind of a thing, and I love that. So if
Yeah,
nothing else, it gives us that.
yeah, and the score was really interesting. And then with little, I mean, I wanted more. It sounded like theremin. I wanted more of it to come out, but they were just like, it felt like they were just like playing with that idea for like sounding otherworldly, you know?
All right. Well, I think we did this. I think we covered this pretty well. We're not experts on any of these films, but we do love movies, and we wanted to shine a light on maybe an aspect of the thing, the specifically the thing from another world that maybe other people aren't talking about, and that because we love classic movies. So that's what this was. So I want to thank you for talking to me about the thing and the thing from another world. And I also want to ask you what's going on in Elfman Land right now. Anything you want to talk about to promote? I know you got a lot of like screenings coming up, some events.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, thank you for having me, and thanks for letting me like deep dive these like silly, fun films that I love. What's going on with us? We've been having a few screenings like locally. I'm in Hollywood and LA. We did a screening of Bloody Bridget, which is our new crazy horror film that Ricky directed and I starred in, and Danny and Ego Plum did the music. I'll just name drop all of those people.
And people can see we've done a full interview about that film and about your involvement with that. So we'll reference people to go check out that full interview right here.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, and then so Rick's working on he's doing like adult animation, so he's coming up with like an IP a month. And so those are really exciting. I've been able to like read the scripts, and he's so funny, and it makes so much sense that he's doing like animation because he's so cartoony naturally, he's a silly guy. Um, we're just still on the tour with Bloody Bridget, so we've got a couple we're in talks for a couple screenings that once I'm allowed to mention, I will. What else?
Where do you
I'm
want people
just
to go to keep up with you to find out the latest dates and the latest news?
Oh yeah, they could find us on social media. Like I'm Anastasia Elfman on Facebook, and Richard's on Facebook as well. And then on Instagram, it's a little tricky because I'm under my stage name Dahlia Demont, and then Richard's under Richard Elfman. And the films all have their own like pages. So that's the best, the social media is the best place to find our information. But also Richard has like a website called richardelfman.com. So that's easy.
And I'll put all the links in the description below this as well.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
this was a blast. Thank you. I want to be clear with the audience that's watching or listening to this. You brought this idea. Like this was your idea. So I want people to know that. Thank you for bringing this, that we could discuss this. I had a great time talking to you about it, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
So we'll have to do it again soon, but until next time, I guess we should just tell people to keep watching the skies.